Come along with us as we explore the broad world of preservation and the work being done to preserve, interpret, and save our past in a 21st century world. From aquaculture to historic foodways to forensic modeling, we're talking weekly with experts from across the globe. This is your host, Nick Redding. Welcome to PreserveCast. Did you know that the Campaign for Historic Trades, which is powered by Preservation Maryland, is the sponsor of 3 registered apprenticeship programs? The campaign also hosts workshops across the nation, maybe even one in your backyard. Visit historictrades.org to learn more and find a way to learn a trade.
This is Nick Redding, and you are once again listening to PreserveCast. Thrilled today to be sitting down with not only a champion of preservation, but also a friend. We're talking with Vice President of Government Relations at the National Park Foundation, Paul Coussan, and we're going to be talking all about his work and leading, directing, managing the foundation's government affairs portfolio and what that means for the national parks and some pretty exciting things that are potentially in the future for the parks when it comes to the restoration of really important resources. But before we get there, we've had Paul on before for those diehard PreserveCast listeners who remember. But we had him on in sort of a different capacity with a different organization, and he's moved on and moved up to the National Park Foundation working on some really exciting stuff. But we should do a refresher on Paul. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What led you to get involved in policy and preservation and all this good stuff?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. It's great to be back on. Good to see you again. Yeah, it's been quite a journey. I moved up to DC about 15 years ago, first to work on the Hill, and ended up with the American Battlefield Trust, then the Civil War Trust, following in your footsteps. I'll note. Was there for a good 11 years, doing a lot of policy work around battlefield preservation, building relationships at the state, local levels, and then ultimately the federal level. And we did a lot of good stuff there. We got the American Battlefield Protection Program reauthorized, got millions invested in battlefield preservation around the country, and including in Maryland, a lot at South Mountain, a lot at Antietam, a lot at Monocacy. So very proud of my work there, but moved on to the National Park Foundation, as you said, almost 3 years ago. And as you noted, my scope expanded dramatically. So now I'm not just preserving and supporting the battlefields in the National Park Service, but all parks across the country, all 433 units. And, I've been a history buff all my life. I was a political science, political communications major, undergrad and grad school, focusing on policy. But the history of the national parks ever since I was a kid and got my first national park passport when I was 10, that's been my go-to. That's been my passion. And so when I left the Hill and found the job at the then Civil War Trust, now American Battlefield Trust, I really found my calling, being able to take the policy skills and my passion for history and communications and put it all into one place. And I haven't looked back, and it's been great. And, like I said, now I get to support all of the national parks on Capitol Hill. And what's great about this work is you go into an office on the Capitol, everyone loves national parks. Everyone loves battlefields. Everyone is proud of these places in their states and their districts. They're passionate about these places as economic engines, as places to preserve their local and national stories in their backyard. And so I like to tell folks who come up for the Park Foundation's annual Hill Day, where we go around the Hill and advocate for national parks, this is the best meeting that these staffers and these members are going to have all day, because we're there to talk about something that they care about, the national parks in their states and in their districts. So happy to be here, happy to continue to be part of this this preservation ecosystem, especially around national parks and our historic places.
Talk to us a little bit about the work of the National Park Foundation more broadly, because I think Some people are familiar with, there's the National Park Service, there's the National Park Foundation, there's a whole host of other organizations out there in the parks ecosphere. What role does the Park Foundation play versus perhaps some of the others, and what lane do you kind of operate in?
Yeah, so we're the official nonprofit partner of the National Park Service. Our role is to support the national parks where it's needed, where they are now. So we have invested millions and millions of dollars of private money that we've raised in national parks around the country. And this has gone to improve housing for park rangers in parks all over the country. I want to highlight one project we're working on in Maryland, but we've invested $40 million in housing at Yellowstone, millions at Acadia in Maine. We've worked to get students into parks. We've worked to teach kids how to fish in their national parks through our Junior Ranger Angler program. We work with the Park Service on different programs to help teach young adults skills to build and improve infrastructure in parks and trail maintenance and you name it. So we were congressionally chartered. That's what sets us really apart. We were congressionally chartered as the official philanthropic partner of the National Park Service back in the 1960s. So we've been doing this for a while, but the centennial of the Park Service back in 2016 was really a moment where the Park Service saw the advantages of having a strong partner with the National Park Foundation to really amplify the work that they're doing and find new ways to support. And we'll say one thing that we really have focused on over the last several years is the park partner community around the country. Most national parks, national historic sites, have a nonprofit partner on the ground supporting them, supporting the work that they're doing. Just in Maryland, you have the Accokeek Foundation just outside D.C. You have the C&O Canal Trust that spans almost the entire length of the Potomac River through Maryland. These are groups that really focus on the local issues, the local needs, and find ways to support their individual parks where they are. And NPF has been really proud of the work that they've done and really proud of the work we've done to support them. Just last year, we granted dozens of grants of $50,000 to the parks, to the park partners, basically just saying, use this however you need it. And it's been great to see some of the work that the park partners have done, hiring staff to support some of the archaeological work that they're doing, investing in trails or housing or different projects that they're working on that they're just like, this is what we need right now in this moment. And it's been great to support them and see the results. So that's kind of how we show up in the Park Service ecosystem. Again, the official nonprofit partner of the Park Service. We don't do much advocacy work. There's lots of groups that are out there that if there's a specific bill that they work on, they will show up or they will advocate to their members of Congress. There are a few exceptions, and the one that I definitely want to highlight is the Great American Outdoors Act and the bill that's going through Congress right now, the America the Beautiful Act. That's one where we're really leaning in and trying to get that done.
Yeah, I mean, that might be a good segue to talk about that. And I think some people probably are more familiar maybe on the ground with a park that they love and they're the friends group that is associated with it. But I think one of the dynamic things, like you said, since the centennial has been the relationship between the foundation and those smaller groups. It's been, as an organization that participates in that ecosphere, we've seen that work firsthand. But one of the big things out there that has really helped the parks in recent years was the Great American Outdoors Act. Pleased to say that we in Maryland sort of stole the idea and created the Great Maryland Outdoors Act to invest in our state parks. So I think others have picked up on this, that this was a really important thing to do. Talk to us about the Great American Outdoors Act, what it did, what role the Park Foundation played in it, why you feel like it's such an important thing that perhaps it's even time to redouble the effort.
Yeah, absolutely. So unfortunately, the onus for the Great American Outdoors Act was years of deferred maintenance, putting big projects in parks around the country on the back burner. We've seen smaller budgets for our national parks over the years. And because of that, things that were a priority, like I said, were pushed to the back burner. So what came from that was about $23 billion with a B of deferred maintenance in our national parks. And this includes roads that needed repair work, bridges that were out of date, out of compliance, were almost hazardous at this point, visitor centers that were built in the 1960s as part of Mission 66. The Park Service's big design movement around that time to highlight the 50th anniversary of the Park Service that in some cases hadn't been touched since the 1960s, unfortunately. So a lot of this stuff just added up. And finally, Congress, the Park Service, park advocates, supporters of the parks, including groups like the National Park Foundation, said, we got to do something about this. And thankfully, in 2020, the Great American Outdoors Act was passed. It was a bipartisan effort in Congress, supported and signed into law by President Trump. And it did two things. One, it permanently funded and reauthorized the Land and Water Conservation Fund, ensuring that public lands would continue to be protected, including a program that you and I were familiar with, the American Battlefield Protection Program, funded through the Land and Water Conservation Fund. It also created what's called the Legacy Restoration Fund. And this was a multi-billion-dollar program that specifically went toward tackling the deferred maintenance backlog in the National Park Service. It put about $1.9 billion a year for 5 years across public lands agencies, with the bulk of that going to the National Park Service. About $1.3 billion annually went to national parks around the country. And just in Maryland and in the greater DMV area, you had about $100 million invested in the seawalls around the tidal basin here in D.C., so right around the Jefferson Memorial. The land had been sinking for decades. And this was about a $100 million fix. And one thing I'll note, Nick, is the Park Service's annual construction budget is about $110 million. So to tackle one of these big projects like that, or a $100 million bridge at Yellowstone, or $100 million revamp of the George Washington Parkway in Virginia, that's going to eat up either the entire Park Service construction budget for 1 year, or it's going to take a piecemeal approach that's going to drag on for years and years and years. So thanks to the Great American Outdoors Act, thanks to the Legacy Restoration Fund, the Park Service was able to identify first some of the top tier needs, like if not for the Great American Outdoors Act, things that would not be taken care of for years, and tackled that. And since then, there have been investments over the last 5 years in all 50 states to tackle projects, whether it's Bureau of Land Management or National Park Service, Forest Service, National Wildlife Refuges. Investments have been made across the country. And just in Maryland alone, about $132 million has been already invested just over 5 years in tackling some of these projects. So that's the good news. The bad news is this program expired last September 30th. It was authorized back in 2020 for 5 years. We hit that 5-year mark. And so what the Park Foundation has been doing, has been leading the charge to try and get across the finish line, is a reauthorization of this program so that the needs that are still out there will continue to be addressed over the next 5 years. The good news is, like I said, $132 million already invested. The need in Maryland is about $700 million. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah, and there's need all across the country, obviously.
Yep.
And I know we have a listenership sort of everywhere. So it, and Paul's pointing out, because obviously we're based here in Maryland, the impact here in Maryland, but it's profound everywhere. And I know you pointed out, because they're big ticket items, sort of the some of these transportation projects, the $100 million, the seawalls, the big crazy infrastructure things, which are important. If you want to get around a national park, it's important to have bridges.
You need the roads.
Yeah, you need the roads, but there's a lot of preservation in this too. A significant amount of historic resources. Are there any that come to mind that you point out when you're, maybe meeting with a member of Congress or you're in district and you're really proud of some things that have been saved?
Yeah, tons actually, which is great. Just a couple that come to mind. We did a ribbon cutting. Actually, it was a groundbreaking back in August of last year at Hot Springs National Park in Arkansas. And this was a GOA investment in the Maurice Bathhouse. And if you're familiar with Hot Springs National Park, part of the park is the natural area around the city of Hot Springs, preserving the hot springs themselves. The other part is the historic bathhouse row. And this is a collection of historic bathhouses from the turn of the 20th century that really brought people to experience these baths, the warm waters of hot springs. And over the decades, they were largely neglected, owned by the Park Service, but kind of just sat there for years after the bathhouse businesses moved out. Once it became less and less popular of a way to treat ailments, I guess you could say. Over the years, the National Park Service thankfully has invested in restoring these bathhouses. And so what was, when I first visited Hot Springs when I was a kid, one or two bathhouses that were still open. One is a visitor center. One is just a model of a bathhouse. All of them except one have been refurbished, revitalized, and reopened as one is a brewery, the only brewery inside of a national park. One is a spa, which makes sense. One is a museum. One is a hotel. And so the Maurice Bathhouse was the last of these that had not been refurbished, had not been revitalized. And so the GOA investment is kind of the completion of that puzzle to bring that bathhouse back to life. And so it was great to get out there with Chairman Bruce Westerman of the Natural Resources Committee, a lot of local partners to celebrate the start of this final piece of the puzzle. And so you'll have this 130-year-old building brought back to life and leased out, really bringing that part of the park back together. Another one that I'll highlight, the Park Service has identified national cemeteries that are within the National Park Service that are going to be invested in and rehabbed. And we've seen a few at Petersburg National Battlefield in Virginia. One that from Louisiana comes to mind is the Chalmette Battlefield just outside New Orleans, right next to the 1812 or 1815 Battle of New Orleans, part of the War of 1812. It's in a floodplain. It's right up against the Mississippi River. So it's seen a lot of wear and tear over the years. And so that's going to be a multi-million-dollar investment to bring that back to life. And just a couple in Maryland. Last year, we actually did a ribbon cutting with the C&O Canal Trust with a lot of local partners. Senator Van Hollen and Congresswoman Delaney came out and joined in the ribbon cutting at the Stonewall just outside the Beltway in Maryland. This was a key part of the towpath along the C&O Canal that was built up over the years because it's much higher than the river itself. So this restored a key part of the C&O Canal. It was a $12 million investment that, again, if not for the legacy restoration, the Great American Outdoors Act would not have happened, would not be reopened and part of the park and the visitor experience and the trail itself. And two others that are in the process, Hampton National Historical Site up north of Baltimore is getting a lot of GO investments to improve the house, not only the house, but the enslaved quarters around the property. And then, of course, the Clara Barton House, which, I've lived in D.C. for 15 years, and it's a crapshoot if it's going to be open or closed, just because it needs a lot of work. And so to see $15 million going into that, to bring it back to life and get it where it needs to be so it can tell the story of Clara Barton, her work from the Civil War and beyond, and how that led to the American Red Cross will just be, again, a great piece of the National Park Service that's being brought back to life thanks to the Legacy Restoration Fund. And I could go on. It's been a really great investment. So
it strikes me that it's sort of quietly and without, I mean, there's a lot of fanfare within the parks and certainly for park advocates and people who see this work happening, but it may be one of the largest preservation projects happening
Yeah.
in the country right now in terms of just the scale of investment and the number of resources protected. And, you know, we've seen that work through our partnership with different parts of the parks and the parks here in Maryland. So it sounds very positive. It seems to me like they must have just figured out how to immediately reauthorize it, right, Paul?
You'd think so. Everything is a process in Congress. So
Okay.
The good thing is, this has been a process since last year. A Senate bill, the America the Beautiful Act, was introduced last May 2025 that would reauthorize it for a number of years. That has already thankfully gotten 68 co-sponsors, 34 Republicans, 34 Democrats. Fast forward to this year, and the House introduced their own version of the America the Beautiful Act. As of today, it has 222 co-sponsors. Again, 111 Democrats, 111 Republicans. That you have such a perfect mirror image, so much symmetry between Republicans and Democrats on one issue speaks volumes for how members of Congress think about their national parks, how popular parks are within Congress, which, again, the best meeting folks are going to have all day is when groups show up to talk about their national parks. And so it's been great to see the support. We were hoping to get this done before the 4th of July. Congress moved quickly. In the month of June, there was a Natural Resources Committee in the House and one in the Senate that both unanimously approved the America the Beautiful Act, both in the span of a week, which, again, is almost unheard of. So we were trying to get it done before the August recess, made a lot of headway. Again, the National Park Foundation supports this effort because, if nothing else, this has been a boon for the national parks. It's brought a lot of support, a lot of money, a lot of attention to our national parks. And it's one area where we can really lean in and say, this is something that should continue. This has been really positive. Like I said, we got right up to August recess. As you can imagine, there are a lot of other priorities going on between the 4th of July and now Congress. The House was in for 2 weeks. So with all the other things, this is still a priority. It's still something that we're going to get done before the end of the year. That's our goal. But they just didn't have the time to tackle it. So the good news is, like I said, 222 House members from almost every single state. The only state we don't have on yet is Delaware. We're hoping Congresswoman McBride joins soon, but half the Maryland delegation is already on. Both senators from Maryland are already on the Senate bill. A lot of broad support from around the country, which has been great. So when folks get back from August recess, we want to get this across the finish line as quickly as we can, because it's gonna do a lot of good. The good thing is, even though it expired, work continues. But until it's reauthorized, new projects can't start. So we got to get this done.
Right. Because there's some leftover funds and funds that rolled over. I was going to ask, is there anything in this version of it that wasn't in the first? Or is it just a clean reauthorization? Like, what can people expect to see in this one versus the last one?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest change you'll see is more oversight from Congress, more involvement from park partners. One thing Congress really wanted to lean into is, this is great, but we want to make sure folks can support these efforts through donations to the national park partners. And one thing we like to point out, it's not a group like the Park Foundation, as big and as much support as we have around the country. We can't fill a $6 billion gap in 5 years in infrastructure around the country. If we were to try and do that, then all the other projects that we focus on would not get the attention that they need. So where we're able to step in is leverage some of the work that's being done. So you look at a place like Theodore Roosevelt National Park up in North Dakota. They just had a huge grand opening of the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library. Meanwhile, a $50 million investment, GOA investment, was made to rehabilitate the South Unit Loop Road in the park. At the same time, the Park Foundation is trying to raise about $20 million to basically rebuild the Painted Canyon Visitor Center. And if you ever go out there, the Painted Canyon Visitor Center is the first Park Service touch point you'll see. It's basically a rest stop on the side of the interstate. Not the best welcome to one of the most spectacular landscapes in the country. So we're working with the state, we're working with the Park Service to rehab that part of the park. And my point is, there's a lot of leverage that the park partners, that the nonprofit community, that private donations can bring in to not directly support the Legacy Restoration Fund, but if we can do this, then that LRF, Legacy Restoration Fund, GOA money goes toward rehabbing the park roads and allows more private donations to come in to build and support the brand new presidential library, Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library. So there's a great leveraging factor that goes into all this stuff that I think Congress really wanted to see more of. So they've been very explicit in this bill. We want to see more private dollars. We want to see more private investments, some motivation to get private dollars going to support some of these projects. And so between the leverage and, there have been projects where the Park Foundation is able to plus up some of the work, whether it's, we invested in some of the interpretive displays at another good historic preservation win. The first bank building in Philadelphia just had its ribbon cutting right before the 4th of July, closed for decades. And now, thanks to an investment from GOA, is now reopened. The Park Foundation put some money in to support the interpretive exhibits, to make it a museum and make it a key part of Independence National Historical Park, or solar panels on a maintenance facility that's going up at Acadia National Park. We're able to enhance in some cases and support some of the work that the Legacy Restoration Fund is already doing. So we want to keep that up. Again, there's a specific call out in this legislation to make sure there's a lot of private money going in to support this stuff. And we're going to continue to do our work to do exactly that. I know a lot of park partners around the country have done the same thing.
Does it create, and not to get too far into the weeds on that, but does it create, because I'm sure some park partners listening are curious about that aspect of it, does it create like a matching fund? Is there like a way that how is it incentivizing or expecting there to be that private match?
The way one version of the legislation kind of laid that out was, if there is a match, if there is some private investment, then that's kind of, it bumps it up the priority list within the Park Service's list of projects. So it's not a one for one. I think Congress just wants to see some level of investment going into some of these projects.
Yeah, it's an interesting new way of kind of looking at that. And in terms of the scale of this, what kind of money are we talking about for this next version, and how long would this next version run?
Sure. So the agreed upon bill that passed through the House and Senate committees would reauthorize the program through fiscal year 2031, so about 5 years, and it would be at the same level, $1.9 billion across the agencies, just as it was laid out back in 2020.
So it's a significant investment, and you're hoping that you can get it done in this next year.
Yes.
And if people want to learn more about it, where can they dig into those details and just kind of learn about how it would impact their state, or all those sorts of things? How do they get more information on this particular piece of legislation?
Sure. The National Park Foundation has a website focused specifically on the Legacy Restoration Fund, nationalparks.org/LRF. The Park Service and the Department of the Interior both have a lot of data out there about the work that's been done around the country. There are state-specific pages that outline some of the projects that are happening now, some of the needs that will continue, hopefully beyond this first iteration of the Legacy Restoration Fund, and once we get this passed. But yeah, there are tons of resources out there. like I said, a lot of support for it, which has been great. Around the country, members of Congress are very much engaged, very interested in this. And I think, again, Nick, it speaks volumes that you have 2/3 of the Senate already signed on as co-sponsors of this bill. You have more than half of the House of Representatives. We hit that magic number of 218 just a few days ago that are in support of this legislation. So, like I said, there are examples in all 50 states of where GOA investments have been made. And forgive me, I use GOA and LRF interchangeably, but GOA, Great American Outdoors Act, created the Legacy Restoration Fund. So it's kind of back and forth. But you can see a lot of these examples, like I said, on the Park Service's website, on the Department of the Interior's website, and also on the Park Foundation's LRF page.
I'm curious, we've talked a lot about LRF and GOA and all these sorts of things and these very pressing particular issues. People might just be curious more broadly. I mean, I know that that's probably taking up a lot of your time, perhaps all of your time right now, because of the scale of the importance of it. But what else does a VP of Government Affairs do at the National Park Foundation? Is it more just making the case for the parks? Is it talking about the normal appropriations? What role do you have within that broader structure?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like you said, the LRF reauthorization has taken up quite a bit of time, but at the same time, the Park Foundation is authorized to receive up to $15 million annually. We get a small appropriation compared to the amount of money that we bring in from private donations around the country. So we make sure that funding is there, try and get it fully funded so we can then match that. And that is a 1-to-1 match that's required. We ultimately make that about a 3-to-1 match. And we take that money and invest in, like I said, housing at Acadia or junior ranger angler programs, or just this year, supporting a new visitor center at Badlands National Park in South Dakota. And there are tons of examples of how we've invested private donations upped in a bit by the appropriation that we get. I mentioned we do a massive annual Hill Day in April. Next year it's going to be in the first week of May. We bring in a lot of partners from Maryland, really around the country, to amplify their work to members of Congress. The most important thing I see is just having those relationships with Congress so that they know what their park partners, what the local voices are doing, how these parks are bringing economic benefits to their local communities, supporting the gateway communities just outside these national parks. Also, bringing visitors in from around the country. Like, members of Congress like to see places in their districts really highlighted and enjoyed by visitors from around the world. And that's what national parks really do. So, in addition to those two things, it's building the relationships. It's finding ways for us to support the national parks, finding new ways to really get in and, where can we support the parks where they are, if not just through donations, through legislation. One thing that we've been working on over the last couple of years, I mentioned before, housing. When I started, I've been in the Park Service space for a long time. By the time I joined the Park Foundation, you kind of forget, okay, where do the rangers live when they're out in, these remote national parks? They need housing. And a lot of parks have come up with solutions to get roofs over these rangers' heads and support staff. But as you can imagine, that's among those things that have seen a lot of neglect over the years. So we've been working on legislation for the past 2 years to find some fixes to make, whether it's new housing or new investments in existing housing. That's one of those things that we've been really looking at and trying to find new ways that we can support, either through private donations or through legislation to improve it, housing for park rangers around the country. And as you can imagine, all these things are interconnected. one of the really cool LRF projects that, again, we've done a lot of what we wanted to do is highlight these wins, these successes for the local communities, amplifying it for the local members of Congress. But a really cool one we did just a couple of weeks ago was a ribbon cutting out at Great Sand Dunes in Colorado to invest in rehabilitating existing Park Service housing within the park. And this was funded through the Legacy Restoration Fund. So you can see that ecosystem of, there's existing housing. Well, maybe we can use some LRF money to pay for rehabilitating this stuff. And we use that as a moment to bring members of Congress and their staffs and to see the work that's being done. And also, kind of a humble brag, the work that we're doing. Like, we didn't invest in Great Sand Dunes directly, but we, the National Park Foundation, thanks to our members, have invested millions of dollars in Park Service housing for rangers, for support staff. And the Park Foundation team actually just went out to Williamsport last week. There's a historic home just, I think, adjacent to the C&O Canal Park headquarters that's getting a facelift that will be used for seasonal housing, hopefully very soon. That and I know a lot of state investments have been part of that. And kudos to the folks at, I think, Wells Fargo, the Maryland Economic Development Corporation, that have also invested in this. So, there are great examples around the country of just the work that we've done that through partnerships we've been able to do. And so finding ways to make those things easier, to answer your question, is what we do when we're not really trying to get the Legacy Restoration Fund across the finish line.
Yeah, no, I love that. And yeah, a little humble brag. We also put some money into that project. Yep. Preservation Maryland, which powers PreserveCast, has made some support of that as well. I guess one thing that strikes me as we kind of move to a conclusion here is that you keep talking about ribbon cuttings and we did this and we were here. People are probably listening and might be a little jealous. How many parks do you visit in a year, Paul? And of the 433, going back to your 10-year-old passport book, how many has Paul Coussan hit?
As of this week, of the 433, I've been to 293 park units.
Okay, so we still got to keep you on the road. You're not done yet.
Yes, not done yet. Want to hit all 433. Definitely doable. It's fun to see a lot of other folks out there hitting that mark, getting to 433. I do this for fun on the weekends too. If I'm not at home, I'm usually in a national park. Work has been great, a great excuse to get out to some of these places, but I try and visit as many as I can on my own. I've been to all of them in this area, in the DC, Maryland, Virginia region. Like I said, I grew up in South Louisiana, so I've been to those parks many times. Lived in Georgia for a few years, but between the battlefields, the national parks themselves, the big NPs that everyone thinks of, the Shenandoahs, the Acadias. There's also, as you and I know, the Gettysburgs, the Antietam's, the Wilson's Creeks, the Jean Lafitte that preserves the Chalmette battlefield. There are parks for everybody. There are lake shores, seashores, mountains. You got the remote parks in Alaska if you can get a private plane to get you out to some of these, or hike the wilderness for weeks. Appalachian Trail. I mean, you name it. There's something for everyone in our parks. And again, the historic sites. I cite, when people ask me what are my favorite parks, there's obviously the big ones like Arches and Grand Canyon. Like, you can't say that's not just an incredible place. I honestly list the C&O Canal among those as my favorite parks because it's a narrow strip of land that parallels the Potomac River. Another one is Dayton Aviation Heritage in Ohio. It's basically credit to Kitty Hawk and Wright Brothers National Memorial, where the first flight happened, which is an incredible spot. Dayton Aviation is where the Wright brothers figured out how to fly. Like, they experimented in their bicycle shops. They built their first planes. They tested it and tested it and tested it. It's a really cool site. So, if I could go on, obviously, but there are so many cool sites that you can check out in those 433. So encourage folks, get out there, see these places, see the work that's being done through private donations, through the Legacy Restoration Fund, through park partners like Preservation Maryland, like the C&O Canal Trust, like the hundreds of park partners around the country able to support the parks.
And we won't ask you your favorite national park, because that probably would
impossible.
You could potentially lose your job, and we don't want to do that. But do you have a favorite historic place or a place that you visited recently that you love?
Gettysburg doesn't get old. Antietam doesn't get old. I spent a few days down at Fredericksburg. Obviously, biased towards the battlefield since I spent so long at the American Battlefield Trust. But, I mentioned Independence National Historical Park, went there for, again, a ribbon cutting for the first bank. I've been to that place many times over the years. And like I said, the first bank was established by Alexander Hamilton. You can imagine these figures walking through these halls and through this building. It's been closed to the public for 55 years, and now it's finally open. So going into that space was pretty cool, and seeing it for the first time. Obviously, go to Independence Hall and the Second Bank and a lot of the other sites, but Independence, especially this year as we celebrate the 250th of the United States, it's a special place. It's a really cool place, and I know they've been busy and probably gotten a lot of visitors and are like, please don't send anyone else. But if you can, go check out Independence National Historical Park. Really cool place, especially this year.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it doesn't close in 2027, so you can always make a trip there as well. The 250th anniversary continues on because the war did not end in 76, as you know. Well, Paul, it's been a pleasure having you back, and we'll make sure there's a link in the show notes to information about the Legacy Restoration Fund, and perhaps with a little bit of luck, by the time this comes out or later this year, we'll be able to post this as an update and say it's passed.
Yes.
Thanks to your good work. So thanks again for joining us. Look forward to hearing from you again as you do your work to save and invest in our national parks.
Absolutely. And thank you, and kudos to you guys for the good work you do throughout Maryland.
Thanks for listening to PreserveCast. To dig deeper into this episode's story, head over to preservecast.org for show notes and our collection of previous episodes. Don't forget to engage with this podcast by subscribing, commenting, and leaving a review. Follow along on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at PreserveCast for even more. PreserveCast is currently recorded in Walkersville, Maryland, and sponsored by the 1772 Foundation, and powered by Preservation Maryland. Thanks for listening, and keep on preserving.